Hello everyone and welcome. It's Dave Bredhauer. Today I'm going to show you two ocean-themed cards, and I'm going to be using a set of dies that I designed to work together. The underwater collage, the coral collage, and the seaweed collage are designed to be layered so that when they are stacked against each other, they create a three-dimensional paper project. Here you can see that the underwater collage goes on top, the coral collage is in the middle, and the seaweed collage goes to the back. Layered together, there's a lot of creative opportunities you can have with this. For today's project, I want to show you what these dies look like individually. So we're going to begin with the underwater collage. I'm going to cut out a piece of double stick adhesive sheet using the underwater collage. Peel off the excess. Make sure that you hold on to those little circles that are in the side because we'll use those later as well. I'm going to use my needle tool to help release the double stick adhesive paper, and then I'm just going to peel it apart and apply it to a sky blue note card. When I designed this card, I wanted to put more than one color of glitter onto the double stick adhesive sheet, so I came up with an idea that allowed me to put it on in a pattern in any way I wanted. I'm using a small craft knife with a swivel tip. Now, you don't necessarily need one with a swivel tip. I think it makes it a little bit easier to make a curve, but any craft knife will work. You're just going to work slow and cut in sort of a wavy line as you go across the adhesive sheet. You want to press hard enough that it gets through the liner, but not so hard that you go all the way through your note card. You'll get a feel for this once you get started. Just apply even pressure as you go across the surface, and it'll cut into that release layer and not all the way into the note card. You'll see that these adhesive sheets are pretty thick, so there's not much chance of going through unless you put a really large amount of pressure on there. Now I mentioned earlier to save those little circles or those bubbles on the side of the die. Those have little double stick adhesive sheet in them as well, and you want to apply those around the die cut shape on the card. If you have trouble getting the release paper off, I found it was easy to use a needle tool to pry things apart and then apply the little bubble wherever you want to on the note card. That way it's all ready for the glitter. After you've set things in place, you need to choose two shades of glitter. I chose turquoise and lapis lazuli. Go ahead and prep the project by pulling off bands of release paper from your double stick adhesive sheet. You want to pull every other band off so that some of the adhesive sheet is exposed, but then other parts are not, and it's masked off in a wave pattern. Don't forget to expose some of the bubbles too. You'll want to get some glitter on those areas as well. Now you can go ahead and start sprinkling the turquoise glitter. I just sprinkle it all over. It's always easier to add more, so I try to add just enough that I think that's going to cover, just knowing that I can always put a little bit more on later if I need it. I'm just going to rub that glitter right into the adhesive sheet using my fingertip. You'll see it sticks to the adhesive sheet and doesn't stick at all to the release paper. Once everything's covered, you can go ahead and tap off the excess and then start removing the bands for the other color of glitter. You can decide what kind of a pattern you want to put onto the adhesive sheet. My waves are about a ½ inch apart, a little bit wobbly, but you can make it a lot more intricate if you wanted to. You might notice that some of that first color of glitter is sticking to the edges. It doesn't even show once you put that second color of glitter on, so it's nothing to worry about. I'm going to go ahead and sprinkle some of the lapis lazuli on there. Again, just pour it on. In this case, it's not going to stick where that turquoise glitter went down first. It's only going to stick where that adhesive sheet is just freshly exposed. I really love this technique because it gives such a completely different look to your die cut. And this would work on any big, solid die cut. I did have this in mind when I designed the die, just thinking that it would be cool to have some wave patterns in there. And there you can see, once it's all done, it's really rich looking, and the waves are exactly where I want them to be, a custom-made design. We're going to embellish the waves with a really friendly little animal. This is the neighborly narwhal. He comes as a whale, and then tabbed onto him is his horn. So you can use him as a narwhal or also just as a whale. I've cut him out of 3 different shades of cardstock, and we only need components of each particular color. I'm just going to keep the white horn, and then for that light blue color, we just need his little tiny eye, and then the bottom part of his body. And for the medium blue color, we need the body and that's all. So you'll have 4 pieces. So we're going to do some paper piecing to assemble this guy together. We're going to turn everything over, put the body down first, and then his belly portion is going to get slipped right into that little area there. And I'm going to use a tape gun to hold everything in place. The tape gun is going to secure that lower portion to the body, and it will help us when we have to adhere the eye onto the project. I want to put 3 or 4 sections of tape onto the back of the whale so that I know that everything is connected and there's plenty of adhesive on the back. Now the trickiest part about assembling this one is to get the eyeball in the right spot. It's light blue, so we need to change the color. I'm just using a permanent Sharpie marker, just rubbing the tip of the marker onto the eyeball, and it'll turn it black. And then I'm going to use a needle tool to stick it into place. Put a dot of glue on his forehead, and then nudge that horn to just the right position and set aside to dry. The cheerful crabs are going to add a little bit of color to the front of the card. They come in a set of 2, and I've cut them out of a bright red cardstock. Just use your needle tool to help poke things out. This is a fairly simple design, so it should come out really nicely. Take the largest crab, flip him over, and put a small square of foam mounting tape on the back. Peel it off, and then mount him onto a piece of scratch paper. I want the crab to be shiny and kind of wet looking, so I'm going to use some glossy accents to make his shell shine. We'll just use the tip of the glossy accents bottle to apply the product. Just squeeze a little bit on there, and then apply gentle pressure as you start to fill in around the shape of the crab. I'm using a little bit of a circular motion when I'm filling in larger areas, and as I'm pulling it across smaller areas like his claws and his legs, you just gently squeeze a little at a time until everything fills in. These will take 30 to 45 minutes to dry, so set them aside. We're going to stamp a sentiment on this card from a Poppystamps clear stamp set called Flower Patch. I just pulled the thank you image out of there, and I'm practicing on a scratch piece of paper to stamp it so I get a feel for it before I stamp my project. Once your ink is dry, you can begin the final assembly. We'll start first with the narwhal. Put a little bit of foam mounting tape on the back. Peel off the release paper and position him somewhat in the center of the waves. Adding the foam mount will add a little bit of dimension to him. Next, you're going to take that crab and you'll position him in the lower left corner. Let some of those bubbles shine a little bit behind him, but that's all there is to it. This project features a beautiful background technique that couldn't be easier. I'm using Distress Oxide inks. This color is called Broken China, and I'm applying to a piece of white cardstock with a sponge, just gently rubbing things on in a circular motion, a little bit heavy in one spot, a little bit lighter in other spots. I'll switch to Distress Oxide in Wilted Violet. I'm just going to put just a touch of this purple color here and there. It's really going to be an undercolor, so I'm just putting it on sparingly. The most color that I'll put on is this Distress Oxide Faded Jeans color. I've sped up the video so you can see all the areas that need to be filled in. I'm slowly buffing it onto the cardstock a little bit at a time. I'm trying not to rub too hard because I want it to go on as evenly as possible. But what I've noticed with this particular ink, it's so smooth. It's almost like working with paint. I'll spritz it with water, and now's when the magic happens. This beautiful glow develops on all the little water spatters that hit that surface. You will love the look of this, and it looks great for underwater scenes. While that's drying, let's assemble the slider card. Start with a piece of mat board that's about 1/2 inch by 6 inches long. I'm going to put a piece of mounting tape above it and below it, and leave enough space so that there's some movement for that piece of mat board to go back and forth to the left. Now you just need to take some foam mounting tape and start lining all the edges of the note card with it. You want to put it all the way around. We're going to build it up into layers here. For the side layers, I want you to cut the piece of foam mounting tape in half so that it's a narrow strip. This only really matters on the bottom, the top, and the left side of the card. It's more helpful if it has a little bit more room to work with there, so we're making that foam mounting tape a little bit narrower, and you'll see why later on. I'm not giving exact dimensions here. You'll find that this design is pretty forgiving, so once you've done it, you'll see it's pretty easy to replicate and get it just in the right spot for things to work out properly. I'm going to pull off those two little pieces of foam mounting tape there, and I'm going to put a little piece of white paper over them. That's going to hold my slider in place without popping into the wrong spot. Now I'll remove the liner from the first layer of foam mounting tape. I'm going to remove it on all four sides so that it's exposed. And then I'm going to start building up my second layer. I'm just going to lay down more foam mounting tape right over the first layer. Do one side at a time. I'll start with that first side that I did. Then don't forget to cut your foam mounting tape in half. Do the bottom and the top, and finish off the second layer on the left-hand side. Pull off the release paper for that second layer, and you're going to put one more layer on there. That third layer is going to be just the right amount so that nothing gets stuck as you're assembling the card and moving that little slider back and forth. I found that if you put enough space in there, things go a little bit better for it. After you finish the third layer, you're going to start using some of those beautiful backgrounds that you made. We're going to take one of the backgrounds, and I'm just going to eyeball it here and cut out a piece that's going to fit down into that space inside the card. You're going to have to trim it a little bit as you go. Just take your scissor, cut a little piece off at a time until it gets to be just the right size. And it's going to need to fit underneath that little slider bar. So we're going to slide that out of the way and apply some adhesive to hold that in place. I'm using a crafter's glue, just a wet adhesive, and put little dots of it along the edge, maybe a little bit in the center, just to make sure that everything's going to stay in the right spot. I'm going to fit that down into the space between the different layers of foam mounting tape, making sure that that slider bar is still out of the way. Make sure it's pressed down nice and flat. We want that slider bar to lay over it. Now grab another one of those beautiful backgrounds you made. This is going to be 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 to fit over the front of the card. And we're going to use one of those underwater collage dies. This one is the seaweed collage, and it's going to cut out our window in the front panel. Now I'm going to lay that in place, and I'm going to use a pencil to mark an opening in the die. We're going to do some stamping, and I want to make sure I have it marked so I know where to stamp. I'm going to take another one of the images from that flower patch set. This one is Make Today Amazing. And after I've practiced, I'm going to stamp it right between those two pencil marks that I made so that it lines up nicely inside the seaweed collage opening. After I stamped it, I was a little disappointed at how dark it looked, so I decided to brighten things up with one of my white rollerball pins. I just traced the middle of the Today section, leaving some of the black outline still showing, and it brightened it up. Looks perfect. Okay, now we're ready to finish off that slider mechanism. Put a little piece of foam mounting tape onto the end of the slider bar. Slide it across, make sure everything's working okay, and you can go ahead and remove that release paper. I've taken another piece of a background paper, and I'm going to put it onto the edge of the slider bar. You see I move that over a little bit. That makes certain that the paper hits the edge and not the slider bar first. We don't want the slider bar showing. Now go ahead and test it. Things should slide easily and not get caught anywhere. If anything gets caught, you may need to adjust the tape a little bit. The final step is to put the collage layer on top and then mount your narwhal into the center. There are a ton of possibilities with this design. I've kept it simple, but I encourage you to create an underwater masterpiece. Until next time, enjoy!